And again, we've got another edition of Top 5 and a dud. The last one we had was Susan the Banshees. Stirred up quite a lot of controversy, should I say. One of the albums I didn't do for that was Juju. But as it turns out, it's definitely a fan favourite. So I'm going to do a video on Juju on its own. But that's what I want. I want people to tell me your list is rubbish. This is the better list. You forgot about this, you forgot about that. It ignites a debate, should I say. So for this one, and it's a great carry-on from Susan the Banshees. Again, it's another favourite band of mine. And the connection's already there. The band I've chosen for this top 5 and a dud is The Cure. They don't need an introduction. Everyone knows who The Cure are. Everyone will like one of their albums somewhere along the line. Now, choosing my top 5 has been quite difficult, especially for this band. The one that should have been in my top 5, I can't find a vinyl, and that was Japanese Whispers. So, is it Japanese Whispers or Japanese Dreams? Anyway, I can't find the album. So it's not my top 5. So I've kind of readjusted a few things. I'm sure the dud on this one is going to create a bit of conversation as well. But I've listened to them all again just to make sure. And this top 5 is definitely correct. And my dud is definitely correct. So to start off with my top 5 is... it's quite a late album for The Cure. And it is the 9th studio album from The Cure, released on the 21st of April 1992 by Fiction Records. Also came out in America on Elektra Records, and it's probably the most successful album for The Cure. And the album I'm talking about is The Cure Wish. This is the one that's just come out. This is literally it's just been remastered and everything, 30th anniversary edition. I can't believe it's like 30 years ago this album came out. But I did pick it up because my original one I had was completely battered. So I thought, right, I'm going to pick up the latest version with this. It's been remastered by Robert Smith. And he's done a good job on this as well. So I'm going to look at the inner sleeve in a sec. When this album first came out, I wasn't that big a fan of it, to be honest, because I thought it was a bit too poppy. But actually, the singles that came off it were really good. Only 3 singles came off this, which I'll talk about in a second. But it is the most successful album from The Cure. It did reach number 1 in the UK albums chart. Again, I've got some information down here because there's so much information for each of these albums, I can't remember everything. The record was the final studio album by The Cure to feature drummer Boris Williams, and its first to feature guitarist keyboardist Perry Beaumonte as well, who previously worked as a roadie for the band, as well as being in the last album to feature guitarist Paul Thompson for 16 years. He did come back, Paul Thompson. So I just kicked the table there, so it's gone a bit wiggly. The album's lead single was High, and I do remember when this came out, I was like, "Oh, this is a bit of a change for The Cure." It was released on 6th of March 1992, and obviously remember at the time as well, 1992, 93, you had the rave explosion, you had coming through the grunge scene, so Cure was still trying to kind of find their place, and the only place they could find at that particular time was go pop, and they did with this album. Quite successfully too. It peaked at number 8 on the UK singles chart and number 42 in the US. The second single, Friday I'm in Love, everyone knows that song. I mean, it's such a sing-along. Was released on 15th of May 1992, reaching number 6 in the UK singles chart. The final single is A Letter to Elise. I don't remember this single, to be honest. I'm not sure why. That came out in October 1992. The song reached 28 in the UK, so that's probably why I didn't hear it. It's quite low in the charts, especially for the singles, how high they were in this album as well. The band that were responsible for the album, Wish, had Robert Smith, of course, the lead vocalist of The Cure, in all their incarnations. Perry Beaumonte on guitars, keyboards, 6-string on Friday I'm in Love and Letter to Elise. Paul Thompson, God, who's this last album to feature, but then he came back 16 years later. Thank God. Simon Gallup, amazing bass guitarist, and he's appeared on a lot of Cure albums. And Boris Williams on drums. This is his first album that he appeared on. It's typical Cure artwork. I wasn't really that impressed with the logo, to be honest, of The Cure. I thought it was just a bit whimsical. But the inside... I think it's now come out on a double vinyl. I'm sure it wasn't at the time. But again, you've got the same kind of artwork. You've got all the lettering. But this repress that's come out, I said the vinyl is super thick. Amazing. You know, it's super thick vinyl. So I do like some of these represses that are coming out, especially compared to a lot of the original versions I've got of these albums. Again, this one came out in a double, and I don't understand why. What is the difference? Because still exactly the same track listing, but it's out on a double vinyl. So my number 5 in my Cure top 5 in a dud is Wish. And it is a good album, a very good album. So my next one, let me just move my piece of paper. I love this album. It's such a good album, and it was the album I'm talking about, and this is my number 4, is Head on the Door. The Cure, Head on the Door. What a great album. So this was the 6th studio album, and it came out on 30th of August 1985 on Fiction Records. It was preceded by the single In Between Days. Now we know that is such an iconic Cure song. As soon as you hear that intro, you know exactly what it is. It's definitely a jump around and a happy song. Quite poppy, considering the other tracks are on this album as well. Which reached number 15 in the UK charts. It became the most successful album to date, entering the charts at number 7 on 7th of September. So up to that point, Head on the Door was the most successful, and obviously then it was followed by Wish, which is their most successful. But up to that point, when Head on the Door came out in 1985, this was the most successful album by them. Paul Thompson, as the 5th official member of the Head on the Door, the first Cure album where all the songs were composed solely by singer and guitarist Robert Smith. So there was no collaboration. This is literally just Robert Smith. What I find interesting with this as well, during the promotion for this album, it was inspired by the albums Kaleidoscope by Susan and the Banshee. Yep, you can definitely hear that on this. But also Dare by the Human League. I don't hear any of them references here on this album, even though Dare is up there. If you've seen my top 20, it's in there. Okay. The album marks the return of Simon Gallup in the group. He had performed and composed with Robert Smith and Log Tolhurst on the Dark Trilogy, the 17 Seconds, Faith and Pornography. I love all them 3 albums. I mean, you know anything about me now. I love kind of the dark music, the darker side of genres, and those 3 albums, part of the Dark Trilogy, were just incredible. So I don't know what to say about this. I mean, this album is such a good album, and you've got things like In Between Days. You've got The Blood, 6 Different Ways. 6 Different Ways is my favourite track on this. He was influenced by, it's amazing when you look at like the tracks that influenced him when he wrote this album. Things like New Order's Blue Monday, whereas I could hear that on The Walk. Also, he used instrumentation because when he was with Susan the Banshees, he added a load of like instrumentation to Swimming Horses, and you can definitely hear that on this album because he made this album around about the same time as he was working on the Cure album. He was working on the Susan the Banshees album at the exactly the same Hyena. So you can definitely hear that kind of crossover between the two. So the title of the album comes from a line in the chorus of Close to Me, which isn't on this album, but we will talk about that shortly. But I really do like this album, and there's definitely a hint of his work with Susie the Banshees on here, because you can definitely hear some of the instrumentation that he used on that particular album. Inside, there's nothing special about it. I do love that colour blue on the label itself. Be interesting to see if there's any more colours of this. I did buy this in Germany when it originally first came out, so maybe this might be a different colour in the UK version, I'm not sure. But this is definitely the German version, and it cost me 19 Deutschmarks. Just shows you how early I bought that. Inside, again, typical kind of Cure, very kind of like basic black text, that's it. The sleeve I thought was quite interesting because it looks like a dove or something flying out of a hand. I've never really investigated what this actually is, but I should have before I did this video. But it does look like a bird flying out of someone's hand. There's definitely hands in there, that's for sure. If anyone knows what this actual artwork is, please put in the comments below, because I forgot to do the research on this. You may see something completely different. But that is my number 4, and that is The Cure with Head on the Door. Favourite song from this album? 6 Different Ways. You haven't heard that, check it out. Great little whimsical track. Brilliant. So, for my next one is my number 3. This was part of the Dark Trilogy. I'm just going to check that, 17 seconds. Yeah, this is still part of the Dark Trilogy, and there's a reason why this is up really high in my charts. And it's The Cure with 17 Seconds. So 17 Seconds was released on 18th of April 1980, and it was the second album from The Cure. I got loads of great information here. The album marked the first time frontman Robert Smith co-produced with Mike Hedges after the departure of original bassist Michael Dempsey. Simon Gallup became an official member along with keyboardist Matthew Hartley, and the single "A Forest" was the band's first entry in the top 40 UK singles chart. And I remember seeing them, I can't remember what show it was, and they were playing live. They did "A Forest." I mean, what a track. I mean, how can you not like "A Forest"? What a brilliant track. I remember the artwork for the 7-inch was quite dark, black and white, the picture of a kind of inverted kind of forest. Brilliant. So at the end of The Cure's 1979 UK tour support to the Banshees, Robert Smith spoke to Les with bassist Michael Dempsey. So there was a lot of, making this album, there's a lot of kind of tension within the band itself. So the thing you're going to notice, just like with the Susan the Banshees, same with The Cure, there's a lot of members leaving and coming and leaving and coming back. There was a lot of that going on as well. So a lot of these are records that, The Cure, Robert Smith wanted an album to sound, he wanted to do what basically Susan the Banshees were doing, how Budgie and Steve Sedgwick would just vibe off a beat and bass and then just start writing to that. He wanted to do that with this album. And I think that's what caused a lot of tensions making this album. You can definitely hear it in the actual tracks. Very dark, very moody, a lot of tension with these tracks as well. And I think that was because of what was going on. I mean, the band members, you had Robert Smith, you had Matthew Hartley, which is new, Lawrence Tolhurst and Simon Gallup. I mean, great lineup. Obviously, later on, you can see there was a lot more kind of tension, especially with my number 1 album. You're going to see that, where it just all fell apart. But the stuff Robert Smith was listening to at the time is quite interesting. He was listening to 5 Leaves Left by Nick Drake. He was listening to Isle of Wight by Jimi Hendrix, Astral Works by Van Morrison, and Low by David Bowie. And you can definitely hear the Low David Bowie references in this album. Definitely influenced by Low. If you know that album, you're going to hear bits and references in this album as well. So when they recorded this, they did this on a budget £2,000 to £3,000, which resulted in the band working 16 to 17 hours a day. I think this is one of the reasons why they probably created a lot of tension, because those are long hours in the studio, and someone who's a music producer, sometimes you've got deadlines, and sometimes you're in the studio all night, and tensions do kind of rise. Everyone kind of fighting for their little corner, and you just want to get something done, and someone's taking their time. So I can imagine the amount of time they had on this. But my God, recording £2,000 to £3,000, classic album, which is now a classic album. I said the 4 band members, Robert, Simon, Matthew and Lowell Turst, created this album. And again, typical Cure. This was probably my favourite Cure logo, actually. And I love the fact that they didn't just kind of plaster the band on it. Cure were one of the bands that didn't plaster all the band on the cross. They did on some of the 12 inches, and they did on a couple of the albums, but most of them had great imagery. And this is definitely one of them. The kind of tracks on here, 1 are Play for Today, what a track. Seacrest, In Your House, 3. You've got The Final Sound, A Forest, brilliant. M, At Night, 17 Seconds. So those track titles are just incredible. Typical Cure, typical kind of dark side of the Cure. But I'd say A Forest is probably the standout track, and Play for Today, and I think they were released as singles at some point, especially A Forest, but I'm sure Play for Today was definitely released as a single. 1980 this came out. Straightforward, not that much going on. Great pictures of the band, but what they've done, they've actually blurred them out so you can actually see them, which is kind of cool. Inside there was no inner sleeve, literally just a white inner sleeve with the classic Fiction logo and the Cure, which if you've got any of the 7 inches or 12 inches from around about the time, exactly the same as that. So that is my number 3. Which is The Cure with 17 Seconds. Now this next one, I reckon people would probably think this should have been my number 1, but it's not. there's a lot of information, so I will be looking down here. My number 2 is Disintegration. This side here, Disintegration. Now again, just to let you know, you probably think, well, it looks different from my cover. It's actually picture disc inside a plastic sleeve with all the text and, you know, all like brilliant. I love this. And again, I got this in Germany for 19 euro, not 19 euros, 19 Deutschmarks. Now this is an incredible album. So Disintegration, I think Disintegration was when probably the time where it brought the band to a lot of new kind of listeners. Very unique. It came out as 8th studio album. It came out 2nd of May 1989 on Fiction Records again. Founding member Lol Tolhurst was fired from the band of making this album. I'd love to know why. I read his book as well, but it doesn't really tell you why he got fired from the band. I know he was drinking a lot, but I'm not quite sure. Especially someone who's a founding member getting fired from their own band. It must have been quite horrific what he was up to. But he's still a member of The Cure, and he's still an icon to me. So this record marks the return of the introspective gothic rock style the band had established in the early 1980s. And you can definitely hear this, because it's definitely going back to like 17 Seconds and Pornography, that kind of vibe. Really dark album. Bit of information here. So as he neared the age of 30, vocalist and guitarist Robert Smith felt an increased pressure to follow up on the band's pop successes with more enduring work. Which is what you hear a lot about people who sign kind of majors. If they've had a hit, they want another one, and not exactly the same. So you can understand some of the pressure some of the band's on, especially writers of the band itself. So I can understand why Robert Smith wanted to kind of take back what The Cure are all about, and he definitely did it with this album. This, coupled with a distaste for the group's newfound popularity, caused Smith to lapse back into the use of hallucinogenic drugs, the effects of which had a strong influence on the production of this album. Disintegration became the band's highest charting album to that point, reaching number 3 in the United Kingdom and at number 2 in the 12 in the United States, and producing several hit singles, including Love Song. Love Song is a great one. For me, I missed Love Song. It didn't feel like it was part of this album, but then you got things like Lullaby, which is just incredible, which I do have, and we're going to do a video in the future on like some of the 12s, because some of the 12 artwork and some of the versions that they've got are just incredible. But Lullaby was just my favourite song, for especially the video. If you ever seen the video? If you've not seen it, check it out. But this whole album is just insane. And the band that were part of this, you had Robert Smith, you had Simon Gallup, Paul Thompson, Boris Williams, Roger O'Donnell, and Lol Tolhurst. So he got sacked making this album. So I'm not really sure what tracks he was involved in. But again, the track titles are just insane. I mean, I can barely read this on here. Disintegration, you've got Same Deep Water as You, Prayers for the Rain, brilliant track. Fascination Street, I mean, what a track as well. I forgot about that one. I need to check that one out again, because that was a great track. I think that came out as a single as well. You had Lullaby, which is probably my favourite song from here. Pictures of You, which is another single. So there is quite a few singles from here, actually, that I didn't realise. So we'll definitely do a video on their singles. But that's my number 2, Disintegration. If you haven't heard it, you have to hear this. If there's any of the albums that you have to hear from The Cure, it's definitely going to be Disintegration. Okay. This is obviously the picture disc version. You can find this, get this version, because the sleeve and everything is just insane. This like PVC sleeve with print on it, which looks great with the vinyl behind it. So it brings me to number 1. And if you've watched my top 20 all-time favourite albums, this is in it. So I'm not going to spend too much on this, because I have spoken about it in depth. So if you want to hear a little bit more about this album, go and check out my top 20, which is we did it quite a while ago. So my number 1 is one of the Dark trilogy from The Cure, and it is Pornography. I mean, when this album came out, I mean, it just blew my mind. I mean, Pornography is the 4th studio album from The Cure. It was released on the 4th of May 1982, and you've probably heard me say many a time, 1982 was just an incredible year. This is one of the reasons as well. What a great album. So again, it came out of Fiction Records, had a new producer and recorded at Rack Studios. The session saw the band on the brink of collapse with heavy drug use, band infighting in the front with Robert Smith's depression fueling the album's musical and lyrical content. So it's kind of an ongoing theme, especially with a lot of the earlier Cure stuff where depression, drugs resulted in really a lot darker albums, which are brilliant. I love. Pornography was The Cure's most popular album to date. So when I'm saying albums to date, so up to the point of this being released in 1982, this was the most popular. And obviously after that you had Disintegration, which was the next popular. Then you had Wish, which was their most popular hit, #1. So following the band's previous album, 1981's Faith, the non-album single Charlotte Sometimes, which is an iconic song, was released. The single in particular is Nightmares and Hallucinatory, I can't even say the word, B-side, Splintered in Her Head, would hint at what would come for Pornography. So that single, after the Faith album came out, this was the single that got released just before this, so it kind of paved the way for the kind of feel and the sound of this album and how dark it was going to be. The fact that he called it Pornography, brilliant. There's no pornography on it, but what a great name for an album. So Robert Smith said at the time, I was really in a really depressed frame of mind between 1981 and 1982. The band had been touring for about 200 days a year and it all got a bit too much because there was never any time to do anything. I mean, you can imagine the amount of pressure, not only from the record labels to kind of write them hits and get in the studio and write them songs, it's the touring and, so you can imagine the pressure and the depression, especially if you do suffer from depression, it probably can bring that to the forefront. But they created this amazing album. I was always spooked by the front cover and the back cover, how they kind of whitewashed their faces out, almost looking very kind of alien, very kind of like dummy looking, non-human. I mean, the tracks on here you've got, I'll pull this out the sleeve so you can have a look. It's got 100 Years, brilliant. Short-Term Effect, The Hanging Gardens, Siamese Twins. There's not one track on here I do not like. The Figurehead, A Strange Day, Cold, Pornography. Every track on this album I absolutely love. What a brilliant album. And again, this was the... I've got the original album. Again, it's all battered, all bent, all creased, but this is the remastered edition, which came out a couple of years ago. So I've managed to pick it up again. Inside sleeve. Again, very Cure. I love that. What a great image. And again, they kind of whitewashed all their faces out so you can't actually see who they are. Again, the vinyl's on really big, thick repress. So I like that. The back, again, lyrics, very sparse. So I do like that. So that is my #1 in my top 5 and a dud for The Cure, and that's Pornography. So out of the top 5, what do you think? Do you think that's correct? Am I missing an album? As I said, the one that should have been in here and wasn't was the Japanese Whispers, I think, album. If I got that wrong, let me know, because I'm trying to remember what it was. It's the one with Love Cats and everything on it. So, that brings us to the dud. And this is definitely going to cause some controversy because I really had to kind of dig deep on this one to find the dud for The Cure. And even though there is one song that I really do like, I wasn't that impressed with it, to be honest. I'm just going to find my dud sheet. And the dud for me is The Cure, The Top. There's probably people gasping in horror. So this is the 5th studio album by The Cure, released on 4th of May 1984 on Fiction Records. It entered the UK Albums Chart number 10 on 12th of May. So again, remember what I was saying. It's still a successful album for The Cure. That's not a dud for me. A dud is something that, I listened to the album. There might be one good tune on it, but I'm not that impressed with this album, to be honest. And there's probably a reason why when I kind of go into it. Shortly after the release, The Cure embarked on a major tour of the United Kingdom in a 3-night residency at the Hammersmith Symphony in London. Love to have seen that. After recording the psychedelic album Blue Sunshine, which is a one-off project with The Glove, during summer 1983. This is at that time Robert Smith was kind of going between The Cure and Susan the Banshees, and went off and made an album called themselves The Glove with Steve Severin. I'm going to do a video on that as well because it is a classic album. Robert Smith finished off the year composing and working on 2 studio albums at the same time: The Top for The Cure and The Hyena for Susan the Banshees. Smith was still the official guitarist for the Banshees while he wrote The Top. So you've heard that saying, spreading yourself too thin. I think this is what he's done here, because his writing for Hyena was great. A couple of good tracks on here, but overall I thought it was a bit of a dud. It's a bit kind of flat for me. And this was the Lowell Tolhurst, where he gave up the drums. Up to this point, he was the drummer for The Cure. He gave up the drums and just moved across to synths for this album. There's a couple of good tracks on here. I'm not going to say they're all bad, but as a whole album, it's not something that I think, yeah, this is an accomplished album. Therefore, it's a dud. So the band with this is Robert Smith, Lowell Tolhurst, and Andy Anderson on drums and percussion. I'm not sure what Andy Anderson did what he did for The Cure, because obviously Lowell had moved on to keyboards. I think because there's only 3-4 of them at the time. A couple of singles from here. I think it was just Caterpillar that got released as a single from here, and I remember seeing on top of the Pops, where they were sitting on the floor with these tablas, and I remember thinking, not getting that. But that was the only single released from here. The one they should have released was Shake Dog Shake, with its just mayhem. There's no structure to it. It's just this wall of sound, and Robert's vocals sounding so good. That's the only good track on this album for me. And I have listened again just to make sure, but it's not. This is definitely my dud, and it peaked at number 10 in the UK charts as well. And that is The Cure, The Top. Now the artwork is kind of reminds me a lot of the Susan the Banshees, the Dreamhouse album. Very golds and blues, and very colourful. I mean, that's insane. That's lovely. That definitely reminds me of a Susan the Banshees album cover. Not like Hyena, definitely like Dreamhouse. Maybe that's the thing they were going for. Artwork is great. Music, not so for me. But if I'm wrong, if this is like one of your favourite albums, let me know why it's one of your favourite albums. I said there's only one album that should have been here. I can't find the vinyl. I shall find it, so I'm going to do a standalone video on that. So that is my top 5 Cure. So the top 5 comprised of, let's find my list. So number 5 was Wish. Number 4 was Head on the Door. Number 3 was 17 Seconds. Number 2 was Disintegration. Number 1 was Pornography. And my dud for this episode was The Top. Let me know your thoughts below. Is there any information that you can add to it that I haven't spoke about, any kind of interesting facts, let me know as well. If you want a debate on my top 5, please, leave messages and we'll have a little debate. Thank you so much for watching, and join me on my next top 5 in a dud. I don't know who it is yet, but join me.